Chapter 30. The Full Moon. Otami came to the Masakis almost every other day for the next 2 weeks or so. Her purpose, however, was not to see Jiro because she always visited after she left for school. If she happened to see him, she simply told him that he must be a good boy. She always had a whispered talk with the Masakis and hastily went back. Jiro was not interested in their talk at all. He was really happy with the lively atmosphere of his new home. One day, to his great surprise, his whole family came to the Masakis. It was nearly supper time. Everybody at the Masakis was busy preparing a meal for them. Many black enameled trays were brought into the drawing room from the kitchen, and in the adjoining room, 2 oblong tables were set with a lot of things to eat on them. Jiro could easily guess what they were for. All the members of the 2 families sat at the tables, the adults in the drawing room and the children in the other room. Grandfather Masaki and Shunsuke were absorbed in talking cheerfully, but all the other members were silent and looked depressed. On the other hand, in the next room, all the children except for Jiro were chatting and eating in a merry mood. He kept alert to what was going on in the drawing room. He could eat everything but was not in a jolly mood like the other children. When the big dinner was over, all the trays were taken away and the children were called into the drawing room. They were allowed to eat boiled water chestnuts. Grandmother Masaki served Shunsuke a bottle of warmed rice wine and a dish of salted fish on a small tray, but he hardly drank that day. Jiro wished to pour his father's cup, but could not do so for shame. The bowl of water chestnuts became empty in half an hour or so, making a heap of leftover shells in a plate nearby. "The water chestnut season will be over soon," said Otami in a depressed mood, looking at the leftovers. "It was pretty hard to gather this much," said Grandmother Masaki. "I was afraid Kyoichi and Shunzo would not be able to eat them anymore, so I looked for them here and there." She looked anxious. "Please don't worry, Mother," said Shunsuke, smiling. "We can have them in the city too. Every evening, young girls come selling them from nearby town." "Is that so?" said Grandfather, and was about to say something. "You should know better, Shunsuke," said his own mother. "Don't you understand how kind she was picking these nuts?" "Yes, I do," said Shunsuke. "I'm very sorry. I should have known better." Stroking his head, he laughed embarrassingly, but everybody else kept silent. They all turned their eyes from Grandmother Honda with a twisted face. When they finished the water chestnuts, all the children moved to the veranda to play arm wrestling, scissor, paper, stone, and so on. Jiro was interested in the games but wished to be near the adult members too. So he sat on a threshold that divided the drawing room from the veranda. Looking out at the garden, he was all ears to the grown-ups at his back. In a corner of the garden there was a big Chinese nettle tree, behind which the round full moon could be seen going up slowly. Each time the early autumn wind blew, it seemed that tiny dewdrops might fall off the tips of each leaf. Jiro was engrossed in the mysterious scene for some time, but soon felt lonesome among the merry-making children and the grown-ups as he looked up at the pale moon by himself. In the meantime, the adults' conversation changed to whispering, but his trained ears caught every word clearly in spite of the children's noisy chattering. They were discussing his treatment. We'd better take him with us, said Otami. He must be jealous if he is made to stay here with his cousins. Grandfather Masaki nodded to himself. I understand what you mean, said Grandmother Masaki. But if Jiro wants to stay here with us, you won't have to worry about him. Jiro won't feel jealous at all, said Grandfather with confidence. He has liked this house from the beginning. Has he? Said Grandfather Honda in quite a high tone. But I think we should make sure this time. In fact, I already asked him about that, said Grandfather Masaki. Did he say that he wants to stay here with you? Asked Grandmother Honda. Yes, he did, said the old man. He told me so distinctly. What an impudent boy, she said in a loud voice. And does he have any idea of his own? Of course not, said Grandfather Masaki. He's just a primary school boy, you know. But we are awfully sorry to put him in your home without any particular reason. There is a good reason, he said, smiling. The other day I told you that I'd like to take care of him, or won't you allow me to do what I like? The old man's voice grew louder. Oh, no, said Grandmother Honda apologetically. I don't mean that. It would be so nice of you, but as you know, Jiro is also one of my 3 grandsons. I'm just worried that he'll be jealous of his 2 brothers when he's left alone. That is all I am concerned about. She turned to Otami and said, Well, Otami-san, your father is kind enough to help us this way. What do you think of trusting him to your parents? But I feel very sorry for him this time, said Otami with a serious look. I put him out to be nursed with Ohama for a long time. If I leave him again to the care of my parents, he'll think that he's been abandoned. Maybe he won't admit us to be his parents. Her repenting words made him turn to them. His eyes met those of his father, who had been watching him all the while. He felt embarrassed, stood up, and walked down to the garden barefoot, following the stepping stones. The dew-wet stones felt cool to his soles. Where are you going, Jiro-chan? Said his cousins, and followed him. Jiro walked to the stone bridge over the small pond and stopped to turn back to them. Look here, the moon is so pretty, he said, pointing to the reflected moon in the pond, but his eyes were fixed to the drawing room. The 4 grown-ups were talking to each other, putting their heads together. Soon the children amused themselves with such games as throwing stones in the pond, shaking the tall tree with all their might, singing in chorus, and so on. Before long, Jiro joined his cousins, and all of them are running about in the garden. Jiro, come here, said Shunsuke from the veranda about half an hour after they were absorbed in their play. He turned back and saw his father's dark, plump silhouette standing on the veranda against the lamplight, rubbing the back of his feet against the stepping stones. Jiro went up to him. We're going to the city tomorrow, he said as he knelt down. Do you want to go with us or to stay here? Tell me which you like better. All the eyes of the grown-ups turned to him from the drawing room. Jiro was too confused to give his answer. He had concluded by himself that he would be left behind with the Masakis and rather preferred it to going to the city. At the crucial moment, however, he felt loneliness rising in his heart. It was not only because he was so attached to his father. He was sorry that all the other members of his family would go away, leaving him behind. His mother's gentle words also lay somewhere in his heart, which made him all the more lonely. He even wished to go with them if possible. However, every charm seemed to be at the Masakis. It was true that he wanted to go with his father, but the thought of leaving the Masakis made him feel as if he would be thrown down to the cold floor from a warm, comfortable bed. If only grandmother were not with them. It was impossible, and he noticed her snake-like eyes gazing at him. "What do you think, Jiro?" asked his father again, but Jiro was silent. "Do you want to stay here? What's the matter with you? I can't guess whether you'd like to go with us or stay here with your cousins." But he kept silent as ever. "Your mother wants to take you along," said Shunsuke. Jiro looked up and glanced at him, but still was silent. "And grandfather Masaki wants to have you stay at this house." With that, Jiro turned to the old man, but could not say anything, casting down his eyes. "How slow you are," said Shunsuke. "But it's all right. We are staying here tonight. You can think about this well and tell me what you think tomorrow morning. But let me say this, Jiro. You can do just as you like it." Shunsuke was about to leave the veranda to join the adults. "Which do you like better, father?" said Jiro abruptly. It was such an unexpected question that he was at a loss what to say. He looked in Jiro's eyes for a moment and said, "I leave it entirely to you. Do as you like. I think it'd be the best way." Bending his head a little sideways, Jiro began rubbing the boards of the veranda with the fingers of his right hand. Neither Jiro nor Shunsuke opened their mouths for about 10 seconds. A mosquito came buzzing weakly by the boy's ear. He drove it away with his right hand and again rubbed the board when grandmother Honda turned to him. "I have the same idea as your mother," she said. "I know how eager the Masakis are to offer to take care of you here, but I'll feel uneasy unless I have the three of you by me. Probably I can't sleep well even a single night if you are left behind." The other grown-ups hung their heads in shame. When taking a glance at grandmother, he turned to Shunsuke and said decisively, "I'll stay here, father." For a moment, nobody uttered a word. Shunsuke looked at Jiro in surprise, too. Then he recovered himself and said, "That'll be fine. The city's only 10 miles from here, so you can come and stay with us every Saturday." Grandfather Masaki approached them as if to shake off the tense atmosphere. He said, "The moon is perfect tonight. Can I have a cup of tea?" Looking up at the moon, Grandmother Masaki said, "I just remembered tonight is the full moon." "Is it?" said Otami. "Then today is Jiro's birthday. I seem to have forgotten about it completely. We've been so busy." She stood up to have a moon. "Actually, I wasn't unaware of that," said Grandmother Honda, "but I didn't mention it because I was afraid we might give them some trouble." The old woman's words only disheartened the others again. Jiro ran to his cousins to play together in the garden, though Kyoichi and Shunzo were still too reserved to play with them. It seemed that Jiro thought nothing of the full moon, mentioned so often ever since he could remember.